No enemy will ever
regardless
even
of the
dream
level
of threatening
income
America's Navy. There's
citizens
no Navy
possess,
even.
or the type of political regimes they live under. Corruption can be uncovered in every place. At precisely 7:42 in the morning, the silent hallways of a Florida law enforcement station burst into turmoil as federal operatives clad in tactical gear advanced quietly with their footsteps hitting the ground like a ticking timer. In mere moments, the entrance flew open, and Sheriff Daniel R. Calderon, who was formerly the symbol of legality and discipline, found himself in restraints while documents lay strewn about the ground. A timekeeper continued moving on the partition, and the insignia that previously represented fairness now dangled pointlessly by his hip. What started as a standard procedure would shortly reveal something significantly more obscure, a quiet violation expanding within the very institution designed to defend the country. And this was merely the commencement. Remain with us, and remember to sign up for Military Power for more comprehensive analysis on the actual conflicts defining America at present. The inquiry regarding Sheriff Daniel R. Calderon moved into a crucial stage when investigators from the FBI commenced their examination inside his headquarters in northern Florida. According to the formal dossier, units retrieved piles of currency, unopened bags of fentanyl, and vessels of crystal meth concealed behind glass-covered awards and inside a secure document storage unit. Every object was listed, captured in images, and moved to federal proof lockers, signaling the start of a complicated graft lawsuit that extended past a solitary jurisdiction. Monetary logs subsequently disclosed that Calderon had taken over $600,000 in illicit bribes linked to two of Mexico's most dominant syndicates, the Sinaloa and the CJNG. These disbursements were meticulously organized and spread out across multiple years to evade discovery. Federal auditors verified that the funds were divided among numerous bank profiles under Calderon's name and those of his intimate colleagues. The probe also connected these assets to questionable real estate acquisitions, including automobiles and countryside plots recorded through third parties. Operatives reviewing internal correspondence records observed abnormalities that suggested a purposeful hindrance of obligations. Documents indicated that surveillance routes in Calderon's zone frequently shifted just moments prior to federal audits. Experts determined that these changes were not accidental, but rather synchronized attempts to shield illegal operations. This trend of interference implied that communal assets had been diverted for individual profit. The examination widened to the sheriff's private electronics, where coded texts and erased monetary memos supplied additional proof of wrongdoing. Digital experts operating under the Department of Homeland Security rebuilt portions of the dialogue, exposing the magnitude of Calderon's web.
The scheme was systematic, hinting at an advanced mechanism that merged regional power with cross-border financing. In the days ensuing the strike, the Justice Department published early statistics displaying a significant increase in organized crime penetration within municipal police bureaus throughout the Southern Territories. Calderon's situation was characterized as a primary illustration of how law-breaking factions could acquire sway by leveraging frail supervision and individual greed. According to that identical document, over 20 officers in neighboring districts were also being scrutinized for comparable crimes. The investigation also revealed weak points within bureaucratic frameworks where a dearth of interagency dialogue permitted abnormal conduct to proceed without verification. Specialists within the FBI's Internal Affairs Branch suggested a fresh prototype of digital surveillance to stop analogous violations. They contended that automation by itself could not ensure honesty without steady oversight and ethical accountability among the command tiers. In Washington, legislative panels started assessing the wider consequences of the Calderon affair. Politicians argued over the necessity for more robust fiscal monitoring of municipal police forces and compulsory disclosure of unaccounted revenue. The event reignited debates concerning the function of federal management in upholding confidence between the populace and the legal apparatus. Observers noted that when dishonesty penetrates the law itself, it generates a void where criminal power can expand without opposition. As the proof piled up, it became evident that the issue was not restricted to a single individual or a single station. The trend of tainted deputies mirrored a countrywide difficulty that required a collective reaction. The disintegration of honor within Calderon's authority demonstrated how brittle the line between power and abuse could be when alertness diminishes. By the conclusion of the initial week, the sheriff's headquarters sat vacant, closed under federal mandate, and watched by plainclothes officers. The shield that formerly signified obligation now acted as a token of treachery. When fairness is exchanged for cash, power forfeits its significance, and the citizenry bears the cost. As federal officers pressed on with their inquiry, focus moved to Emily Calderon, the spouse of the shamed Florida sheriff. Formal documents listed her as the proprietor of a modest janitorial service incorporated 3 years prior in the city of Ocala. In documentation, the enterprise looked valid, as it registered a humble business location, a taxation reference number, and several quarterly submissions. However, when detectives scrutinized the specifics, they discovered no staff members, no maintenance agreements, and no confirmed customers. Notwithstanding that, the business declared tens of thousands of dollars in transactions every single month. This discrepancy provoked instant worry among fiscal experts within the Justice Department.
Subsequent analysis disclosed that Emily's firm had accepted numerous deposits from personal ledgers linked to commercial entities already under cartel scrutiny. The rhythm of deposits and extractions implied orchestration rather than chance. Federal auditors observed that the quantities cycling through the ledger adhered to a recurring pattern, with almost exact totals arriving and departing within brief windows of time. The behavior aligned with profiles usually linked to fiscal laundering schemes that mask unlawful proceeds as business earnings. Banking records acquired through judicial orders disclosed that the capital did not stay within the business for long. Exchanges frequently moved through middlemen institutions before being scattered to subsidiary accounts. Detectives emphasized that this technique permitted the origin of the currency to seem removed from its initial conduit. Every transaction obscured the tracking path of cartel earnings as it penetrated the American economic framework. Experts stressed that such flow constituted not merely a financial danger, but also a defiance of federal control systems intended to defend fiscal openness. The probe intensified when interdepartmental collaboration started between the FBI's Financial Offenses Branch and the Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. By merging information collections from several territories, they found extra companies connected by duplicate locations, common telephone digits, and recurring contact identities. These signals verified that Emily Calderon's venture was a component of a broader web of phantom corporations functioning under distinct filings, but governed with a comparable hierarchy. The proof showed that what commenced as a municipal disgrace had grown into a synchronized mechanism spanning across state lines. Federal attorneys calculated that a minimum of 7 associated bodies were operating concurrently, collectively handling several $million over a span of 2 years. The majority of the capital came from areas in Texas, Arizona, and California, where cartel influence was already rooted. The revelation of this sequence of activities demonstrated how organized crime adjusts to statutory boundaries, turning public reliance into a shield for illegal transport. Forensic experts also examined digital messages between the profiles, pinpointing robotic payment timetables and timed withdrawals. This timing showed a superior degree of organization, which demanded access to economic proficiency and understanding of statutory gaps. Authorities remarked that the transfers remained just beneath the disclosure limits established by federal banking regulations, which restricted instant discovery. Such exactness implied a calculated effort to leverage voids within the monitoring framework. The outcomes of this inquiry triggered a reaction from Florida's Office of the Inspector General.
The Bureau declared a fresh adherence assessment for all small enterprises incorporated by law enforcement households in the territory. Initial briefing suggested that at least 4 distinct companies would confront comparable observation. The goal was to stop prospective abuse of commercial permits as defensive covers for criminal funding. By the time federal auditors finished the primary review, they had revealed a mechanism that utilized legality as a disguise. Every level of paperwork granted criminal money the look of legitimacy. When currency of illegal source moves through valid banks and companies, it does not vanish, it changes. In the perspective of the economy, it becomes standard tender, identical to legal earnings. This alteration is what permits dishonesty to flourish silently inside the establishments intended to stop it. In the weeks ensuing the capture of Sheriff Daniel R. Calderon, federal bureaus initiated one of the biggest synchronized enforcement campaigns in Florida's modern past. The effort was directed collaboratively by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and the Department of Homeland Security. Its goal was to take apart the criminal framework that had developed around Calderon's sway and to reveal extra webs connected to cartel funding. Strategy for the strikes had commenced months prior under rigorous secrecy, with numerous specialized units working throughout the state. The initial set of maneuvers occurred in the town of Ocala, where operatives rushed several sites listed as leisure enterprises. Among them was a cyber gaming center that outwardly provided basic amusement facilities. Inside, detectives found electronic betting terminals, concealed money trays, and bookkeeping programs coded to hide earnings. Over 30 people were held during the Ocala stage of the maneuver. Authorities verified that the confiscated items held transfer statistics directly linked to the profiles utilized by Emily Calderon's cleaning firm, establishing a fiscal link between regional activities and cartel webs. At the same moment, another unit moved on objectives in Lake County. Operatives served numerous warrants against storage depots and workplaces previously connected to Calderon's partners. Inside, they retrieved roughly $280,000 in currency, as well as handwritten notebooks that recorded dates, signatures, and encrypted icons. Forensic auditors studying these files determined that the papers mirrored a comprehensive system of internal disbursements intended to handle distribution profits. The existence of duplicate marking trends across multiple locations confirmed that the activity was centralized and skillfully managed. The third and most major strike happened at a complex in the CRMY industrial sector, where intel implied that arms and drugs were being stockpiled. When the combat team breached the structure, they located 324 weapons, including long guns and handguns, along with a calculated 2.3 tons of banned materials.
The proof-filled scores of bins and detectives remarked on the variety of the stockpile, hinting at a blend of local and foreign arms. Among the most alarming discoveries was a scribbled roster naming police officers under the headers Secure, Insecure, and Ours. The paper suggested that segments of the enforcement hierarchy had been breached and that criminal factions were keeping internal observation of faithful contacts. The outcomes of these united maneuvers revealed the scale of the issue. Federal experts tracked over $42 million that had moved through phantom firms over a span of 3 years. These monies flowed through valid bank ledgers, building companies, and transport services before being put back into the marketplace. The massive amount of fiscal circulation showed that the web functioned with the competence of a mid-sized firm rather than a hidden venture. Authorities portrayed the framework as a mixed system that merged criminal capital with bureaucratic validity. Florida's legal chief confirmed that 126 people were placed in detention statewide as a consequence of the strikes. Among them were company proprietors, bookkeepers, and 2 former police officers charged with aiding fiscal exchanges. The capture interrupted a mechanism that had operated quietly for years without attracting public notice. Many of the accused faced indictments, including organized crime, plotting, and breaches of federal drug laws. Public reaction was instantaneous. Local media channels broadcasted extended queues outside tribunals as inhabitants looked for details regarding upcoming trials and asset forfeitures. In numerous villages, municipal leaders convened urgent gatherings to assess internal checking procedures. The exposure of such extensive wrongdoing within a solitary state stunned residents who had formerly regarded their agencies as safe. Observers contended that the strikes constituted a vital move in rebuilding responsibility, yet they also disclosed how profoundly organized crime had merged into local administration. National safety monitors stressed that this matter was more than a fiscal disgrace. It showed how contemporary criminal syndicates progress by leveraging voids in oversight and by planting themselves within lawful frameworks. The incidents in Florida underscored a shift of organized crime from brutal conflict to administrative invasion. Law enforcement specialists cautioned that this tactic could permit criminal factions to sway legislation, interrupt probes, and dilute the trustworthiness of democratic bodies. By the conclusion of the campaign, the United Bureaus had not only taken apart Calderon's direct web, but also revealed a trend that may reach far past Florida. The insights gained from this inquiry became the bedrock for new federal tactics directed at tracing dishonesty within domestic agencies. The strikes demonstrated that when criminal businesses adjust to the frameworks of justice, they no longer fight the system from the exterior, they remold it from the interior.
Following the broad maneuvers in Florida, federal focus moved toward the southern frontier, where detectives started to reveal a troubling expansion of the corruption web. The discoveries suggested that the invasion did not cease within municipal stations, but had attained federal ranks, tasked with regulating one of the most delicate boundaries in the country. This finding constituted a major rise in the danger to national safety. At the El Paso crossing point, Customs and Border Protection Officer Manuel Perez, Jr. was charged with permitting trucks filled with drugs and unregistered travelers to move through verification lanes without assessment. Logs demonstrated that this behavior persisted for several months, often adhering to a routine that matched cartel shipping timetables already under observation. Detectives remarked that the trucks approved by Perez exhibited duplicate hiding techniques and came from the identical areas in northern Mexico, verifying alignment between internal and external participants. In California, two extra CBP officers, Jesse Garcia and Diego Bono, were connected to a more technically nuanced type of conspiracy. Legal papers disclosed that both agents conversed with traffickers using encrypted digital icons. The texts, sent via secure programs, acted as instant signs to show when traversing lanes were secure. A solar image directed traffickers to advance, a thumbs-up verified approval, and an automobile icon signaled the suitable checking area. This signaling mechanism allowed the transit of over 1,100 pounds of drugs across the boundary before officials spotted the leak. Analysts within the Department of Homeland Security subsequently categorized this technique as one of the most inventive yet perilous instances of digital invasion into enforcement protocols. The breadth of dishonesty expanded further when proof connected extra officials to direct monetary exchanges. In one of the most grave instances, CBP officer Leonard Darnell George was found guilty of taking over $400,000 in payoffs in return for sanctioning illicit crossings. Detectives concluded that the funds were moved through third parties and masked as private borrowings. The ensuing verdict resulted in a federal jail term of 23 years, highlighting the gravity of the crime. Despite the judicial result, internal audits warned that the root weaknesses remained, as comparable methods could be copied by other tainted agents. The probe also touched the U.S. Border Patrol, where Agent Alexander Bennett Gindley was accused of moving drugs during active service hours.
Proof demonstrated that he utilized state vehicles and surveillance paths to ship contraband while keeping the facade of standard guard duties. The disclosure that an on-duty agent could engage in such behavior while donning the formal attire triggered an internal revamp of monitoring rules.
Top authorities stressed the significance of refreshed moral schooling and digital tracing for staff working near high-threat zones. By the middle of the year, the Department of Homeland Security assembled an evaluation outlining the total harm inflicted by these violations. The document verified that cartel-connected dishonesty had become ingrained along segments of the boundary, with instances found in Texas, Arizona, and California. Fiscal Review calculated that the aggregate worth of prohibited items that moved unseen during the probed duration surpassed $30 million. The results disclosed that criminal webs no longer depended solely on physical intrusion. Instead, they had built an operational prototype based on leverage, payoffs, and chosen collaboration with insiders. The trend of dishonesty revealed a crucial change in the mechanics of border regulation. Rather than trying to overwhelm federal guards, organized crime had adjusted by focusing on individuals within the enforcement ladder. By tainting a few tactically placed officers, they effectively generated fleeting hallways of exemption that skirted safety mechanisms. Scholars from national security institutes noted that this approach mirrored a wider change in cartel maneuvers, centering less on brutality and more on institutional handling. The incidents along the U.S.-Mexico frontier verified a deep reality. Criminal syndicates did not need to attack the barrier. They only required to purchase the sentries. The risk was not in the quantity of arms crossing the limit, but in the count of relied-upon officials ready to ignore it. This epiphany compelled federal lawmakers to rethink the notion of defense, realizing that the genuine frontier of national safety resides within the agencies sworn to defend it. As the border inquiries advanced, the Federal Bureau of Investigation assembled a countrywide evaluation detailing how profoundly organized crime had permeated American establishments. The document demonstrated that invasion reached from tiny district offices to major global crossing points, suggesting that the issue was architectural rather than solitary. This deduction represented a pivot point in the comprehension of internal safety, moving the emphasis from individual wrongdoing to systemic frailty. According to federal statistics, detectives found more than 19,000 fake identity papers and 800 doctored licenses connected to preceding cartel activities. Furthermore, fiscal tracing disclosed that roughly $42 million had been cleaned through bogus corporations and doctored agreements in merely 36 months. The magnitude of these discoveries showed that criminal webs had built engines capable of skirting customary supervision and planting themselves inside valid administrative frameworks. Officials within the Department of Justice cautioned that such degrees of invasion could not have been attained without entry to policy-making roles.
Analysts determined that the cartels had calculatedly spent on connections that supplied sway over standard processes.
By nurturing partnerships within critical bureaus, they managed to handle internal workflows without direct conflict. The method turned corruption into a type of quiet possession, where mastery was exerted through cash, adherence, and chosen quietness rather than overt force. Subsequent study indicated that the invasion pattern adhered to a pyramid layout. At the foundation were minor clerks tasked with local documentation and transport clearance. In the center were managers who sanctioned permissions and handled interdepartmental messaging. At the summit stood a tiny ring of policymakers whose collaboration permitted entire maneuvers to proceed unseen. This latter mimicked the arrangement of lawful institutions, which made the web hard to spot. Each actor performed a restricted function, guaranteeing that the revelation of one tier would not bring down the remainder. Federal counterintelligence teams started auditing message logs across numerous bureaus to spot ties that had previously gone unmonitored. The probe revealed cross-referenced phone rosters between civilian vendors, private guard companies, and police officers under assessment. The reality of these intersections demonstrated how criminal factions had leveraged the intricacy of the American administrative apparatus. They had discovered that red tape, when splintered, could act as both disguise and shield. By the conclusion of the review duration, the FBI suggested fresh internal steps, including centralized authentication platforms and compulsory interagency information exchange. The Bureau also pushed for a cultural change in how honesty was tracked, emphasizing avoidance rather than response. The results verified that modern cartels had progressed beyond customary criminal conduct. They had become mixed entities, capable of fusing with the structures intended to resist them. This revelation signaled a crucial instant for U.S. safety doctrine, showing that the protection of a country relies as much on internal rigor as on external shielding. The wake of the Calderon inquiry left Florida and numerous border states confronting a deep crisis of faith. Medical centers registered a steep rise in fentanyl-linked fatalities, while neighborhoods voiced increasing doubt toward police and the judicial apparatus. The exposures of dishonesty within municipal bureaus rattled public trust in agencies once viewed as unshakable. In reply, the Department of Homeland Security and the Federal Bureau of Investigation commenced new internal audit schemes to watch fiscal movement and tighten operational supervision along the frontier. These steps were intended to rebuild responsibility and stop similar leaks in the days to come. On the legislative side, the affair compelled Washington to rethink the definition of national safety. Analysts contended that defense could no longer be characterized solely by outside dangers, but must also face the peril arising from within government frameworks. The cartels had shown that leverage and funds could accomplish what brutality could not, eroding steadiness from the interior. The tactical moral was plain. A country does not crumble because of foes outside its barriers, but because those within cease defending it. The route ahead relies on tougher internal alertness, regional collaboration with allies in Mexico and the Caribbean, and a refreshed dedication to public honor. The narrative of Sheriff Calderon is more than a dossier on dishonesty. It is a mirror of how delicate integrity can be when authority encounters enticement. Remember to distribute your views in the remarks below and subscribe to Military Power to stay updated about the actual maneuvers and probes defining our globe today.